The air in the geothermal nexus tasted of ozone and ancient, pressurized dust. Kalen pressed his palm against the crystalline solar core, his skin sizzling as the sunglass amulet flared white-hot against his chest. Above the atmosphere, the Terran hegemony fleet readied their orbital lances. He had seconds to decide, burn them out of the sky or let them drown in the crushing weight of their own sins. Would you sacrifice your soul to save a world that isn't even yours? Let's go back to where the trial began. The amber tea in Alara's cup had grown cold 2 hours before the man she loved was led into the citadel in chains. Beneath the vaulted arches of the amber citadel, a shadow moved. Alara sat upon the throne, her fingers tracing the sharp, cold edges of her crown as she watched the guards escort Kalen toward the center of the hall. He didn't look like a prisoner, even with the gravity cuffs humming a low, discordant note around his wrists. He looked like a man who had spent his entire life waiting for the other shoe to drop, and now that it finally had, he was at peace. The High Council muttered about purity and the sanctity of the Sylvani bloodlines, their voices like the dry rustle of autumn leaves. They called his presence a stain. They called his unauthorized relationship with the air a crime against the history of Ethelgard. Then came Mary. The girl didn't wait for permission or the proper ritual of entry. She darted past the ceremonial guards, her small, translucent wings buzzing with a frantic, iridescent agitation. She didn't seek the comfort of the throne. Instead, she threw her arms around Kalen's legs, burying her tear-streaked face in his rough, Terran-spun trousers. "I didn't choose to be a father," Kalen said, his voice a low rasp that silenced the room. "I just didn't walk away when she needed someone to stay." The holographic portraits in the gallery of echoes don't hold back, and the child knew it. She clung to him with the desperation of a seedling seeking water in a drought. Silence fell. Total. Absolute. Alara watched the way Kalen's jaw tightened as he looked down at the princess. She knew that look. It was the same expression he wore when he fixed the failing environmental scrubbers in the lower levels, or when he stayed awake through the bioluminescent storms to soothe Miri's night terrors. The council didn't see a father. They saw a former soldier of the Terran hegemony, the very people who had once scorched the outer rim. To the highborn, he was a weapon trying to pretend he was a hearth. But Alara saw the sun-glass amulet, the star crystal leaf pendant tucked beneath his shirt, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light that matched the weary beating of his heart. A sharp, metallic crack split the air. It wasn't a gavel that had struck. It was the sound of the citadel's northern rampart collapsing under a sudden, violent impact. The obsidian talons had arrived. They didn't come for diplomacy. They came for the solar core. Black, greasy smoke began to pour through the ventilation shafts as the court descended into a panic. The counselors, so bold when judging a man's heart, scrambled like frightened insects. Alara stood, her energy weapons humming to life at her hips, but her eyes remained on Kalen. He had already scooped Mary into his arms, shielding her small body with his own. The bunker entrance was a hidden seam in the obsidian floor, accessible only through a biometric lock that responded to royal blood. But as the ceiling groaned under the weight of incoming hegemony artillery, the interface remained a stubborn, glowing red. The system was ancient, temperamental, and failing in the heat of the assault. Kalen stepped forward, placing his hand over Alara's on the sensor. The sunglass amulet began to glow with an intense amber heat. "The ancient machinery doesn't obey bloodlines," Kalen whispered, echoing a truth Alara had long suspected. "It obeys the heart of the one who protects it." With a hiss of hydraulics, the way opened. "The palace is falling, but the real war is just beginning. Join us as we go deeper into the archives." The archive halls smelled like the slow, agonizing death of history. Alara watched Kalen move, his Terran efficiency a sharp contrast to the fluid, melodic martial arts of her own guard. He didn't waste a single motion. Every strike against the Talon infiltrators was a calculated necessity, a grim choreography of survival. He was a man built by a war he clearly wanted to forget, yet here he was, using those same hands to keep a Sovani child from witnessing the carnage. Then the sky turned a bruised, bleeding red. The hegemony fleet had arrived in orbit. Their voices crackled over the emergency comms, a cold, metallic drone demanding Kalen's surrender for supposed war crimes. Ironically, the crimes they listed were the very ones Alara knew Kalen had tried to stop. She saw the way his jaw tightened at the sound of the Terran commander's voice. It wasn't the look of a criminal facing justice, it was the look of a man facing his own personal nightmare, which meant the war was already lost unless they reached the planetary defense nexus. They were nearly at the subterranean vaults when the archives began to melt. The obsidian talons were using thermite chargers to burn the Sylvani's collective memory, turning thousands of years of wisdom into slag. "They're trying to bury the truth before we can reach the core," Kalen shouted over the roar of the inferno. He grabbed a heavy crystalline shelf, using his sheer physical strength to create a bridge over a river of molten glass. Alara crossed first, then reached back for him. For a moment, their hands locked. The heat was unbearable, but his grip was a grounding weight in the chaos. Truth is, Alara had never seen a man fight so hard for a world that treated him like a monster. Deep beneath the palace, the geothermal nexus hummed with the power of a captured sun. The ozone taste returned, sharper now, metallic and thick. Kalen stood before the crystalline solar core, his palm already pressed into the searing light. The sunglass amulet fused with his chest, turning his rib cage into a cage of white-hot wire. Above them, the fleet's sensors were locked on. They were waiting for a reason to fire. Kalen didn't choose the vaporization protocols. Instead, he opened his mind. He let the core act as a prism, magnifying the horrors he had witnessed as a soldier. He didn't just send data, he sent the smell of charred air, the sound of children crying in the dark, and the crushing weight of a soldier's regret. In orbit, 1,000 Terran pilots felt the feedback of objective truth. It was more devastating than any energy beam. The fleet didn't just stop their attack, they stalled in the void, their commanders sobbing into open comms as they confessed every atrocity they had ever hidden. 6 months later, the sky over the citadel was no longer red. Beneath the central tree, Kalen and Alara stood as the court watched them plant the Hearthstone seed. It was a small, unassuming thing, but as it touched the soil, the dry earth began to pulse with a deep, emerald light. The sunglass amulet now sat around Miri's neck, its fire dimmed to a gentle, protective glow. Kalen took Alara's hand, and for the first time since he had arrived on this world, he didn't look like he was waiting for the end. The peace was written in the roots of the tree. Kalen found his home in the ruins of his past. If you believe family is more than just blood, subscribe for more stories from the Cosmic Edge. What's one choice that changed your life forever? We'll see you tomorrow.